So, hi everyone, I'm Mackayla, and today we are welcoming Chris to the Soundtrack of Our Lives podcast to talk about his new EP. We're really glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Can you just talk a little bit about the inspiration behind it?
Sure. It's called This Euphoric State, and these are 5 songs that I'm very excited about. One of them has been with me and reworked a couple of times since like the late 90s, and others are just sort of like, it's some fictional stories, and a couple of them are based on real life things, like, Until the Stars Go Dim is kind of like loosely based on, the years when my wife and I were dating. And it's just it's like a 5 song dose of pop rock ear candy is the way I've been marketing it. But I'm very excited about it. I hope people give it a listen and find something in it that they connect with or that resonates with them, because that's what it's all about. That's why we make music, is to make a connection with the listener. So
Yeah, so you mentioned you've had one of the songs for a while. So why do you feel that now is the right time to release it?
Well, Midnight Sun has actually, I've been in a couple of different bands over the years. I played keyboard in a classic rock band in the late 90s, and we did a version. I wrote, that's when I wrote Midnight Sun, and we did sort of a classic rock version of it. And then from the late 90s into the early 2000s, I was lead singer, guitarist, keyboard player for a local band called Union Jack. And we kind of took it and, I don't know, updated it a little bit to make it sound more like a modern rock, a little bit more like a modern rock song. And then when I started playing solo gigs again in 2014, I brought it back out again. And it's just, I don't know, I think sometimes it's cool to see the way a song can evolve over the years and over the decades, given, I don't want to say like you're jumping onto a fad or something, but it's more like as the song grows and you listen to it, it's just like, probably when you listen to a song on a CD or something, you've been listening to it for 10 years and you say, oh, what would have been good right there if they did a little, maybe a little guitar fill or a little keyboard part, like right at the end or something. So in a way, it's just kind of been percolating and evolving for the last, I don't want to say 25 years because that makes me sound old, but it really has been kind of a work in progress. And we actually did release the song. Union Jack released the song on our Static CD, which was, that was December 8th, 2000. So 23 years later, it gets a reworking and is released in a more, a different form. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's very interesting because I love seeing when people rework old songs and just how it has changed over time.
You know who was famous for that? Eddie Van Halen. Like Eddie Van Halen, even after they recorded a song on a CD, Van Halen would play a song out in concert for years, and it would still kind of evolve beyond the recording. He would start doing little things here and little things there that weren't on the original recording. And, they have recorded it 10 years later, it probably would have sounded different than it did when they recorded it in, 1980 or 1984 or whatever. It's just cool how music evolves over time.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting to just kind of watch the evolution of songs like that.
Yeah.
So you've been part of a couple of different bands. How has that influenced this work that you're doing by yourself?
It's influenced it very much. I mean, I grew up, I was in high school in the late 80s, and that's when, sort of like, oh my gosh, we had like, I guess my parents thought disco was bad, but we had like the hair metal and, Poison and Bon Jovi and Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and that kind of stuff. And then seemingly in the blink of an eye in 1991, Nirvana came on the scene, and grunge kind of changed everything. And I'm still way into 90s music. But I think, different aspects of the classic rock band and the modern rock band that I was in have sort of melded, and you can kind of hear that these songs on the EP, or, they're not really like hair metal, but you can definitely hear some of the, like, I don't know, if you listen to some of the instrumentation in Summer Skies, it almost sounds like a Poison ballad or something,
I can see
but
that.
it also has a little bit of like, but you can also hear some influences of like Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and the stuff that I was listening to in college. So, and to me, like the 90s music, you just can't beat that. And I've had that debate with people, and I guess, whatever music people listen to in their 20s when they were in college aged or whatever is always going to be like their favorite genre of music. But Not to say that this is a grunge EP. It's very, very far from it. It's more like, more like stuff you would hear on like Sirius XM pop rocks, like in the vein of Matchbox 20 or Train, or I hate comparing it to other bands because then people listen to, oh, that does sound like Matchbox 20,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm getting at. It's
I
just
do,
sort
yeah.
of that, just sort of that cross between like, somewhere between hard rock and pop, it's somewhere in the middle.
How do you kind of find that middle ground without making it too much of one or the other?
It's very easy for me because most of the gigs that I do are solo acoustic. So,
Okay.
Gigging with an acoustic guitar in my lap and a microphone and nothing else. So it's hard for me to like imagine things getting too heavy or things to be getting too like elevator music. Like to me, it's always, things always start in sort of that like John Mayer, John Mellencamp, pick up an acoustic guitar and play a song kind of vein. And then it's a matter of filling in the blanks with instrumentation and guitar solo here, drums there, some organ there. I mean, I think I went into the studio with kind of like a mentality of like, all right, look, this is what like a modern Tom Petty record would sound like, like if Tom Petty were out in like 2023, this is kind of what it would sound like. And you got the whole gamut. You've got like Until the Stars Go Dim, which is a very, very much an acoustic love song, all the way to like Machine, which is, it's probably it's the heaviest song on the EP, but it's not heavy like, it's not like Metallica heavy. It's just got a driving beat with some, complex machinations working around in the guitars and that kind of stuff. So it runs the whole gamut. You've got a party song, a love song, a breakup song, sort of a classic rock sounding song, and a heavier song. So it's almost a little something for everybody,
Yeah, so you have mentioned before that some of them are real and then some of them are fictional. So how, when you're going into choosing songs for this EP, did you decide which ones to take that were real and then which ones that were fictional?
It's just purely the ones that I like the most, honestly. I always try to come up with melodies and harmonies that are melodic and easy for the ear to listen to, and I just kind of picked and said, all right, you know what, these 5 are, and that's why I'm doing an EP really instead of like a full-length album. I mean, we're living through the era of Spotify and streaming and TikTok, and people have an attention span of about 30 seconds, so sitting down and listening to a 12-song album, it's tough for this generation, and a lot of people just kind of say like, hey, give me your 5 best songs. So all right, here you go, here are my 5 best songs. I hope you like them.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of going off of what's going on with this generation, at any point do you see yourself putting out that longer length album, or are you going to stick more towards shorter because of the attention span?
That could certainly happen. It could certainly happen. It's a matter of, how quickly the creative juices get flowing. And, if you find 10 or 12 songs that fit together as a cohesive unit and would make a good album, I would certainly be open to that. I'm certainly not going to, I feel like some artists come up with like 5 or 6 songs and then this, oh shoot, all right, we need to write 4 or 5 more songs real quick just so we can fill out an album. I don't want to fall into that trap of just saying, I don't want to create music just because I have to fill up enough space to, make a full-length album. If I write another 5 great songs and decide, all right, you know what, let's just do another EP, then so be it. It all depends. I want it to be very organic and not forced.
Yeah, I don't like when albums sound forced because then it doesn't work.
Yeah, because then, I mean, inevitably there's always like 2 or 3 songs where you're, skip that one. Just skip that one.
Yeah.
My goal is always to create a no skip album, EP, whatever,
That's a good goal.
Or you get like a B-side, like, and you listen to that B-side and you're like, man, where the hell did that come from? I don't like that at all. So I just don't want to like come up with stuff. I don't want to create something just for the sake of creating it. There has to be like inspiration or meaning behind it.
Yeah. So I guess going along that kind of thread, where does your inspiration come from for your music?
A lot of the times it usually starts with like a, maybe like a cool chord progression or guitar lick that I just happen to, pick up when I'm warming up or when I'm playing or whatever. And once I find something that sounds like it could become a song, then I try to draw back on like real life experiences, important moments in my life. try to fill in the blanks from there. And then, sometimes you embellish it with a few jazz riffs here and there, like, who taught you to dance? It kind of became this story of the first song, Who Taught You to Dance, kind of became this story of this guy who's trying to impress a woman on the dance floor and winds up, failing miserably. And it's just kind of, it's kind of a humorous party song, so.
Yeah. So, and then how do you approach the songwriting aspect?
Yeah, and again, and like I said, it usually starts with it's different from artist to artist, and sometimes it's different from song to song. Like Midnight Sun, I think very much began with the story, and then I came coming up with music to tell that story. Other songs like Machine kind of started with the instrumentation and this like killer guitar chord progression, and then it's a matter of coming up with a lyrics or a story to go along with it. And then getting into the studio, fortunately I work with just a fantastic studio guy, John Grant, over at Secret Sound in Middle River, and we can just bounce ideas off each other like really quickly. Like, hey, from here I want it to sound like this, or like I want it to sound like pieces of this song with a little bit of this song mixed in, and we'll come up with like, okay, well, what if the electric guitar did this, and what if we had like mandolins going in the chorus, and we just can kind of brainstorm and flesh out how we want to like brain map the song, and it all just miraculously comes together and it all works out.
Yeah. So, what's the biggest difference making this EP by yourself versus when you've done other stuff in the past with bands?
Yeah, it's a very different experience when you're in the studio with a band. I mean, I don't know how much folks know about the recording process, but you probably picture like the four guys sitting there playing the song and trying to get it right and record it, and it's done. When it's really not like that at all. I mean, first you might lay down the rhythm guitar player might do his thing, and then while that's playing back, the lead singer will do his thing, and then they'll do it again, and while those two tracks are playing back, the drummer will do his thing, and then when those three things are done, they'll play it back and the keyboard player kind of layers his thing. And just doing it solo is a totally different experience because, you sort of have the creative freedom to kind of say like, hey, here's what I want the drums to sound like. Here's what I want the bass line to sound like. Here's what I want the guitar solo to sound like. It's really just, I can't find the right word for it, but it's really just different, instead of waiting to see how all the different band members come together and how it sounds, it's just more a matter of envisioning it in your head and working with yourself, with your recording studio to kind of make it. It's really like starting with a blank canvas. I mean, you've got the basics down, you got the chords, you got the lyrics, this is how the basic idea of the sound is going to go. And then you start painting and you put one layer and then you put another layer and you put another layer. And finally it comes out. You're like, wow, this is amazing,
Yeah.
So it's really, I mean, there are pros and cons to doing it both ways. I really fortunately got along really well with everyone in both bands that I've been a part of. Great bunch of guys in both bands. It was fun to do it that way, but it's a whole different experience to do it solo. It was a lot of fun, and creatively it was very cathartic.
Yeah. So when you're struggling creatively, how do you kind of get that flowing again?
I have two remedies that I always fall back on if I ever hit like writer's block. And one is just getting out and gigging, because just being in front of a crowd and, just playing your instrument, sometimes you'll just get kind of energized by the crowd and you'll start noodling. I'll start noodling around on the guitar and I'll come up with something really cool. It's, oh man, there's my next song, or I'll just hold myself up in the bedroom, slap on some headphones and just start listening to great albums. Sometimes you'll hear something in the back of a track, maybe just like the subtlest little background riff or whatever. And wow, you know what? That could almost be its own song, and kind of expound on it from there. So there are no better solutions for writer's block than getting out and gigging and playing your instrument, or just immersing yourself in great music. And you know what? Actually, there's a third option. Sometimes just getting out in nature, just like taking a hike or going out and sitting by a brook and listening to the water, trickle or whatever. Just sometimes being out in nature can spark that creative flow in you too.
Yeah. Are there any particular albums that you find yourself coming back to when you're trying to find more inspiration?
I mean, songwriters are just like anybody else. We go back to our favorite artists
Mhm.
that, kind of like inspired our songwriting stuff. And, my couple of my favorite bands, Guns N' Roses, Dream Theater, sometimes some of that progressive rock stuff is so
Mhm.
complex that it triggers something in the creative portion of your brain. So throwing on some Dream Theater or Box Beard or Neil Morse, that kind of stuff can kind of open you up to different possibilities that you wouldn't explore if you were, just listening to top 40 music. You
Yeah.
gotta get out of that. Not that there's anything wrong with top 40 music, but it's just very
Mhm.
formulaic. Oh, verse,
Yeah.
chorus, bridge, chorus, fancy ending. And honestly, sometimes I fall into that trap myself. Like I come up with this grandiose thing, like, all right, this song is going to be this wonderful, enormous thing, and then I hear how that sounds, and it's not that great. So you know what? All right, let's just do verse, chorus, solo, chorus, and call it a day.
Yeah.
And some songs that's great, and some songs it doesn't work, and you just have to kind of experiment and throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Mhm. So when you are trying to throw stuff at the wall, how long does that typically take you to figure out a song?
Not very long. I like to think that I have a pretty good ear for what's going to work and what's not going to work. I
Mhm.
might play around with some chords or a riff for like a day or two. And, if I'm trying to write some stuff and I just can't get anything to go along with it, I'll either scrap it or just kind of throw it sometimes I just record stuff on my phone and I'll save that. All right, you know what? We'll save that. Maybe that can be the bridge in a different song. Like you write something and then that
Mhm.
little riff can be like the variation. I would say, yeah, it's probably within like 1 or 2 days, I'll know whether it's going to work and turn into a song or whether it's just a fleeting glimpse of something.
Mhm. That makes sense. Yeah, so I guess going back a little bit to your journey with music, when did you know that that's what you wanted to do?
And I remember even when I was just a little kid, we'd go to visit my grandmother in Delaware, and I would just start plucking away at her piano and started playing by ear. And luckily, my parents decided to get me lessons when I was still in grade school. So I started playing piano in grade school and picked up a guitar in college. And it's been sort of a long journey since then. I started doing music as like a side venture, in different,
Mhm.
well, I started playing, first of all, I started playing piano in church groups, back in the 80s. And that was my first experience with actually being part of a quote unquote music group. And then, played in different bands through the 90s. All the while, I had this day job going and being in banking and digital marketing and trying different things and mortgage business. And finally, after about 20 years in corporate America, it just kind of hit me like, what am I doing? All this time, music, I keep changing jobs and changing positions and changing careers. And all this time, what's the one constant thing that's always been there? It's music. I've always been playing
Mhm.
music, whether it's in church or whether it's in a band or whether it's solo, no matter what is going on in my life, I'm always playing music. So that's it. That should just be it. I wish I had done it sooner. I quit my day job. Oh gosh, let's see, 2017, 2018. So I started playing out solo again in 2014 while working, in mortgage business and whatever. Quit my day job in 2018. So what's that? Five years now, full time
Mhm.
into the music scene. So, and I'm always telling people, how long have you been doing this? Oh, my whole life, but I only started doing it full time 5 years ago. I wish I had done it sooner.
Yeah. What has that transition to being full-time look like for you?
It's probably the most exciting, most terrifying thing that you can do. It's just,
Mhm.
to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to quit my day job and go at this full steam ahead. But sometimes in life, you have to burn the bridges behind you so that
Mhm.
there's no safety net. You just got to either make it or you're toast. So
Yeah.
we went at it full steam ahead. And fortunately, my wife is a saint and has been very supportive of the whole process. And here we are. I'm finally about to release my first solo EP, and it's just been a really cool, liberating, but also terrifying experience.
Yeah, so what advice would you have for anyone who's kind of struggling if they, should quit and go full-time in music?
I don't know. You don't have the video on, so you can't see my hat, but my hat says "Never give up," and just follow the advice of Winston Churchill: never,
Mhm.
never, never, never give up. And just when you feel like giving up, never give up.
That's
Just
good advice.
keep at it, keep at it. Here I am. I've been playing in church groups and music groups since, the late 80s or 90s. I've been part of 3 different bands. And here we are, finally got to the point where I've got some material and releasing my first album, and been fortunate enough to be able to book enough performances and gigs to pay the bills. So, and I think some of that, what helps in that is that a lot of my career was spent in sales. So like persistence has never been a weakness of mine. Hey, can I play at your place? No. Hey, can I play at your place? No. Can I play at your place? No. Hey, can I play? Fine, here's some gigs. Play some dates at my place. What do they say in sales? It takes 5 or 6 no's to get to a yes. So everything I learned about sales, I learned when my kids were little. Dad, can I have a piece of chocolate? No. Dad, can I have some chocolate? No. Dad, can I have some chocolate? Fine, here, have some chocolate. Just eventually you get through and you make a connection with people, and it all comes together.
Yeah. So a little bit more about the EP.
Yep.
What do you want fans to take away from it when they listen?
Honestly, I just hope that there's a song that they connect with, something that resonates with them. Hopefully it's something that, people listen to and can connect with. I mean, especially and I don't know if it's just because it's the last song or whatever, but I've had a few friends of mine who listened to all the tracks and they're like, man, that riff in Summer Skies, it just gets stuck in my head. It's just, I can't get it out of my head. And that's how it was for me. And that's when I knew all right, this is going to make a good song, because it sticks with people. And, I would go to bed and that riff is in my head. I would wake up and that riff was in my head. I'm like, all right, I got to get this down on paper and get it recorded. So, hopefully it's the kind of thing where you listen to it and becomes a bit of an earworm. Sometimes I find that the best way to get an earworm out of your head is to listen to the song again. So listen to it, connect with it, and listen to it again. And just when you think you've listened to it too much, then you play it again.
You can always get something new out of a song.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of song that I like. Not, some songs you listen to it like twice and you're like, oh, that's kind of simple. That's all there is to it. But I like the kind of songs that are kind of multi-layered, and you notice something on the 10th time that you didn't notice on the 5th time, and you notice something else on the 20th time that you didn't notice on the 10th time. And that's my goal, is for people to listen to it and for their brain to have something to sort of unpack while they're listening. So, oh, you know what? This is the 10th time I've listened to that, and I never noticed those mandolins in that chorus before, or I never picked up on that banjo in the final refrain.
Yeah, you've mentioned a lot about playing live. What is your favorite aspect of doing a live show?
My favorite aspect of playing a live show is connecting with the audience. A lot of times when you're a solo acoustic guy, you kind of tend to be like, it's great if people are paying attention to you, but more often than not, you end up being like background music. So I like to just kind of keep an eye on the crowd and keep an eye on the people at the bar. Once you hit that 3rd or 4th song, you see that one person over at the bar who's mouthing the words with you. And you're like, all right, I got him. I connected with that person. Oh, look, there's another lady over there who's also singing along. Got him, and just kind of see which songs connect with which people. And I also like to adjust the set list on the fly, based on the crowd. Oh, you know what, this is an older crowd, so I might mix in some more Neil Young or some more Allman Brothers or whatever. Or hey, you know what, this crowd seems to mostly be in their 20s, so I think I'm going to mix in more Harry Styles, more Lumineers, more modern stuff. And I kind of grade myself as I go along, all right, well, that went pretty well. I got through those 4 songs and I got 3 more people who are really into the music, and they're keeping up. And I say all the time, it's kind of like Zen for me also, whatever problems are going on in the world or in my head, by the time I get to that 5th or 6th song, I'm just in the zone. All the problems kind of disappear, and hopefully the people listening to the show have that same experience. What was it? Tom Petty? I think Tom Petty said, if I'm up there playing music and everybody just forgets about their problems for 2 hours, then I've done my job.
Yeah, are there any songs that you kind of find yourself coming back to consistently more than others?
I think that's, definitely true. If I'm having trouble, there are some songs that are just sort of no matter what age group you're in or what music you like, they connect with people, and I don't really know why that is. If it's just that those songs have become such an iconic staple that no matter what age group you're in, people will always come up and request them. For example, Zombie, Cranberries,
Hmm.
great song, phenomenal song. Dolores O'Riordan, wonderful singer. I've had requests for Zombie from 20-year-olds. I've had requests from Zombie for Zombie from 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds. It doesn't matter. I had this one guy playing out, and I finished my show, and he was on my website looking at my song. He's like, "Oh, you know Zombie? I'm sorry, I missed that." Like, like what? Where did there's like hundreds of songs on my set list, and he's like, "Oh, I wish I had caught Zombie." So you just never know.
Hmm.
Pearl Jam, Black, another one, just kind of resonates. If I'm having trouble connecting with an audience, I can always jump into Pearl Jam, Black, and I'll catch a few people's eyes and be like, "Whoa, that's a great song." Sweet Child of Mine, another just sort of like staple. I'll often end the set with that because the ending is so killer. But
Hmm.
yeah, there are definitely a handful of songs that are like my fallback. All right, if I'm having trouble connecting with this crowd, I'm going to pull this one out, and this is going to do it.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely.
Are there any requests from people that have surprised you?
There are, and actually, some of those requests for songs that are not in my set list have become some of the best songs in my set list.
Hmm.
Like I remember probably 3 or 4 years after I started playing out solo, somebody came up and requested "Breakfast at Tiffany's" by Deep Blue Something. Great, great. I love one-hit wonders. "Breakfast at Tiffany's," Harvey Danger, Flagpole Sitta, another great one-hit wonder. I love those one-hit wonder songs
Hmm.
that are just like a flash in the pan. But anyway, they came up and requested "Breakfast at Tiffany's," and I'm like, I've never played it, but I'm familiar with it. So
Hmm.
I just kind of dialed up the lyrics and put it together, and boom, it went spectacularly, and that became a huge part of my set list from that
Hmm.
point on. Wagon Wheel was another request that I got, and I don't do a ton of country, but I'm doing more and more of it as I get requests for it. And Wagon Wheel has actually become, more often than not, that's like the closer. That's like the last song in the set list. So that has become another huge part of the set list. So yeah, there are definitely some requests that have caught me off guard and have gone on to become staples in the repertoire. So
Yeah. I just find it interesting to see what surprises people that are, songs that people ask for because
sure.
it's interesting.
Another one, Goo Goo Dolls, Iris.
Hmm.
Started getting requests for that pretty regularly, so I learned it, and now it's like, I play that one almost every night now, just because. And I figure if so many people are requesting it, then it's gonna connect with a lot of people. So
Yeah, makes
I do
sense.
it, and it always gets a nice response. So
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, what is kind of next for you, like looking to the future, what is to come?
I mean, eventually, I'd probably like you said, put out another album or EP. But again, I'm not gonna rush things. I'm in sort of a very happy place in my life,
Hmm.
personally and career wise, and that sort of stuff. So, and well, we've also got kids. I've got one who's grown and on her own, and one in college, and one in high school. So the primary responsibility is always the kids. But yeah, I mean, I would like to just kind of continue play some new places that I haven't played before, maybe connect with some new people, which is why I'm, releasing the EP, is just kind of get the music out there and
Hmm.
hopefully have it connect with people, and, eventually follow it up with an even better EP or album down the road.
Yeah. So before I ask the last question, was there anything else you wanted to mention or talk about today?
I think we've pretty much covered the full gamut. So yeah.
Okay, so the last question is, what is the soundtrack of your life?
What is the soundtrack of my life? I would say it's it's a little bit of pop, a little bit of rock, a little bit of country, and actually it's probably the station that I listen to. The two stations that I listen to the most, I'm a big Sirius XM junkie,
Hmm.
so 9 times out of 10 I'm either listening to pop rocks, which has a lot of 90s alternative and some newer stuff, or I'm listening to Lithium, which is 90s grunge, which was my, like, in college, 90s grunge was my only addiction. So it's just kind of, grew up on Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains,
Hmm.
Nirvana, all those. Like, I just love those, like, I love those like rich major chords or major seventh chords that are just like full of distortion. There was just, and it's very polarizing. Like, I've got, a couple of friends of mine are older and didn't go through that whole grunge thing. Oh, I can't stand grunge music, it's terrible. And like, I don't know, like, maybe if you Well, I was going to say if you didn't grow up with it, maybe you're not fond of it, but I do know a lot of younger people, even like in their 20s, who are very connected to like 90s music and grunge bands and that sort of thing. So,
Hmm.
while my high school years were spent listening to, to big hair spandex metal, I think grunge and alt 90s music eventually won me over. I think that was
Hmm.
just, and I don't know, I might disagree with like, well, that's just because you grew up with that in your 20s, whatever music you listen to in your 20s is going to be your favorite. I do think though that there was something really special about grunge and the alternative 90s
Hmm.
scene. So like, I don't know, the soundtrack to my life, might be like Sirius XM, Lithium, grunge bands,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff, flannel shirts. I fell in love with that whole movement, and it was sort of like here one day and gone the next. Grunge
Yeah.
became popular 1991, and by 95 the scene was like changing over and already, we were already seeing like some of that emo music taking over the scene, which is, yeah, it's fine. I don't I do some emo if I get requests for it. I'll do some Fall Out Boy or Blink 182 or whatever, but my fallback stuff is always going to be Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, any of that, like just
Hmm.
that really grungy, distorted, major tonality kind of stuff. In fact, there's a new band called Super Bloom. I love their music. They made me feel kind of old. They're like, yeah, we wanted it to be that kind of like 90s, distorted music like our fathers listened to. I was like, ouch, but I will say my Spotify Wrapped, my number one most listened to artist last year was Super Bloom, just because they have such a cool retro, like alt 90s kind of vibe.
Hmm.
It's really cool. So
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming and talking to me today.
thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah. So for any of our listeners that want to follow you and stay updated on your music, where can they find you?
All of my socials, schedule, calendar, all that fun stuff is on my link tree, is connected to www.seechrislive.com, seechrislive.com.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much again. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye bye.